In reviewing this past year, I took a look at some of the things I spoke about on Sunday mornings, and I noticed that several of my talks this past year have been inspired by songs. 2 weeks ago, I based my talk on Pure Imagination, which is a song from Willy Wonka, and a few weeks before that, I based my talk on This Is the Moment from the Broadway musical Jekyll and Hyde. And this week's talk is also inspired by a song that I used to hear often growing up in church. It is well with my soul. It's a hymn that was written by Horatio Spafford, first published in 1876, and it's been translated into dozens of languages, and it appears in hymnals all over the world. And the opening lines set the idea of the entire song. When peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows flow, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Now that's a truly great thought. When peace is flowing like a river, it is well with my soul. And when crashing waves of trouble are my experience, it is well with my soul. Now, it takes a very mindful person to maintain that type of attitude through good times and bad. And I'm sure that most folks who sing this song fall short of that ideal, at least some of the time. Now, many people will tell you that an attitude like that, a positive attitude regardless of the circumstances, is Pollyanna thinking at best and insanely delusional at worst. And I used to be one of those people who would have told you that. Before I understood what positive thinking is actually about, and before I proved to my own satisfaction that it does in fact work, I would have told you that any fool can look on the bright side of things. It takes a real genius like me to see how rotten things really are. But it's not only possible to say it is well when times are tough, it's actually the right thing to do. And tough times are the right time to say it. Now, please note that I'm not asking you to go around every day saying, oh, it's all good, it's all good. This originated with teenagers a few years ago, and they used it as sort of a fill-in-the-gap kind of statement, you know, like so and like and I don't know and hey, dude, and that kind of stuff, whatever. Yeah. So you used to hear conversations along the lines of, like, I'm breaking up with you. Whatever, it's all good. So, I'm not talking about mindlessly saying it's all good just to have something to say. I'm talking about a level of spiritual connectedness that allows us to know that all is well, not just when it's all good, but even when it seems to be all bad. Years ago, a major gallery sponsored a competition for artists, and they were offering a prize for the best painting on the subject of peace. Now, the painting that won was a surprise, because the scene was the ocean in a violent storm. The sky was dark, the lightning was cutting across the sky, and the waves were crashing against the rock walls of the cliffs by the shore. Where was the peace? Well, you had to look very closely to understand what was going on, because there, about halfway up the cliff, was a tiny hollow in the rock. There was a bird's nest tucked into it, and a mother bird was sitting on that nest with her little babies tucked beneath her, sleeping soundly. That was peace. And, of course, that's what a mother hen does with her chicks whenever danger is near. She gathers them under her wings and covers and protects them. The Bible says that Spirit does the same thing with its children. We find in the book of Psalms, he shall cover you, and under his wings you can trust. There, under his
connected.
you need not fear the terror by night, nor the destruction by day, for the Lord is your refuge and a place of protection. And in another psalm it says, lead me to that rock that is higher than I. Thou hast been a shelter for me. And that gets repeated in yet another psalm, which says, hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for you have been a shelter for me. Well, you and I are confronted at times with potential dangers, fears, doubts, heartbreaks, losses, and even when our lives are relatively free from all these things, our headlines are dominated by dangers and losses and anxieties and fears. But when those bad times, real or imagined, come, we can be ready for the incredible peace that can be found in the midst of every storm. In Psalm 46, we find the key for knowing that it is well always. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. And the more troubled things are, the more we need to take shelter in that which is within us. The psalmist goes on to say, therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Everything's collapsing, even things that have always been there for us. Have no fear, because God is our refuge and strength. Now, if you keep in mind that there's only one life, and that life is good because that life is God, then you realize that God really is your strength. You can't get up and walk across this room without the animating force of Spirit within you, the life that is eternal and ever present in us as us. The psalmist continues, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. That is the peace like a river attending your soul, as the hymn says. The psalmist continues, God is within her, and she will not fall. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, the Lord Almighty is with us. Be still and know that I am God. Now, we've all been in stormy situations where it seemed as if everything was hitting us all at once. Conflicts, hurts, wounds, anger, fear, the works. There may not seem to be any way out, and we may get overwhelmed. But in the midst of life's storms, there is a powerful solution. We can speak peace to the storm. You've probably heard the story of Jesus and his disciples getting into a boat to travel to the other shore. And Jesus decided to take a nap. And about halfway across the waters, a severe storm blew up. And the disciples panicked and woke Jesus up and demanded that he do something. And the story goes that amidst the howling winds and rain, Jesus arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, peace, be still. And he then went to the back of the boat, lay down, and went back to sleep. Now, I've always been intrigued by this concept of speaking to the storm. A number of years ago, we were on a tour of the Midwest and the South, and we were somewhere in far western Missouri, pretty much the middle of nothing, where the exits off the interstate were few and far between, and what few exits there were didn't seem to have much to offer a traveler. And we finally, it was getting about lunchtime, we finally spotted a Dairy Queen. We could see it from the interstate, so we said, let's pull off and we'll get some lunch. So we got off the main road, And interestingly enough, even though you could see this thing, you had to take the craziest zigzag of different roads to get to this Dairy Queen. So we're standing in line to place our order, and I asked the fellow in front of me, I said, "Excuse me, I'm not from around here." It was kind of a convoluted thing figuring out how to get from the interstate to here. "Is there a better way of getting back onto it?" And he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm from Florida." And he said, "Oh, I wouldn't want to live there. We got way too many of them hurricanes." And I said, "Well, you know, it's part of living in Florida." "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Oklahoma." I said, "Well, you have tornadoes." He said, "They don't bother me none." I said, "How about that?" He said, "Well, when the storms is a-coming, I go out in the backyard and I rebuke them." Now, I thought he was joking, so I laughed, and I said, "Does that work?" And he said, "If you do it in Jesus' name." So anyway, whether you can rebuke the storm, I really don't know. But the story of Jesus rebuking and calming the storm may or may not be literally true. And I'm not sure really that it matters one way or another. But the stories of the Bible do have a point. And the lesson that I take from this story is that it's possible to have peace in the midst of any storm. And I've always wondered if Jesus really was talking to the storm or the sea when he said, "Peace, be still." I think it's just possible he was really talking to the disciples. "Hey, pipe down. What's the matter with you? I'm trying to take a nap. Everything is okay. Peace, be still." Now, the notable thing about Jesus in the storm is that he existed in an entirely different atmosphere than that which was surrounding everyone else in that boat. While the disciples focused on the waves and the winds and the driving rain, literally whipping themselves into a panic, Jesus was at complete rest. So, to me, the takeaway in this story is that we can take authority over the rough places in our lives. We can learn to speak peace to our inner storms. We can deliberately, consciously choose to pipe down. We can say to our anxieties, "Peace, be still." Remember that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers." We become the ultimate peacemakers when we consciously choose to speak peace to our situations. Now, peace is not just the absence of a storm, but rest in the middle of the storm. And many of us could use that kind of peace right now. And it's the kind of peace that you can have right now if you're resting where you ought to be. That is, if you're resting in the consciousness of the great I am, the real you that has every resource needed to ride out the storm. Ernest Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind textbook, "Whoever becomes receptive to the idea of peace, poise, and calm, whoever embodies these divine realities, finds them flowing through him, and he becomes peaceful, poised, and calm." You may have noticed in the past few years there's been a profusion of merchandise based on a World War II era poster, a British poster. It has a drawing of the Royal British Crown and then the words, "Keep calm and carry on." Well, at the beginning of World War II, the British government created the Ministry of Information as the department responsible for publicizing a unified message to the English people. And in late 1939, the Ministry of Information was commissioned to design several morale-boosting posters that would be displayed during the hazardous times that lie ahead. And with a bold colored background, the posters were required to be similar in style and feature the symbolic crown of King George VI, along with a simple yet effective message. And the first two posters, "Your courage, your cheerfulness, Your resolution will bring us victory, and freedom is in peril. These were produced by His Majesty's Stationery Office. They were posted in public transportation, in shop windows, and on community bulletin boards throughout Britain. And the third and final poster of this set was again very straightforward and to the point. It simply read, "Keep calm and carry on." The plan for this poster was to issue it only in the event of an invasion of Britain. And since this never happened, the poster was never seen by the public. And it's believed that most all of the Keep Calm posters were destroyed at the end of the war in 1945. However, 60 years later, a bookseller stumbled across a copy hidden in a pile of dusty old books that he had bought at an auction. And he had the poster framed and displayed it in his bookstore. And people found it compelling and asked if they could purchase a copy. So the bookseller arranged for several to be printed up, and the thing spread like wildfire. And now you can purchase posters, t-shirts, and mugs imprinted with "Keep Calm and Carry On." And dozens of variations have appeared. Keep calm and bake brownies. Keep calm and go fishing. Keep calm and smoke weed. And the list goes on and on. But it's wonderful to think that all of these years later, people still find that original message so appealing and reassuring. No matter what happens, keep calm and carry on. We could say, when times are tough, keep calm and do a spiritual mind treatment. And when your nerves are shot, we could say, keep calm and meditate. And when you're struggling with doubt, we could say, keep calm and double down on your affirmations. Pollyanna? No. In the textbook, under a section titled, "Let Us Not Fool Ourselves," Ernest Holmes says that doing our spiritual work is not theoretical, but practical. It's not about having a mental world that's ideal and perfect, while our physical world is in shambles. We're not saying peace where there is no peace. No, we're turning to the peace that's already within us. There is that place within you that is always at peace. We're not trying to gin up peace in our lives. We're turning to that peace that's already within. We are, through affirmations, meditations, and treatments, removing the buildup of negative thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are blocking the natural flow of peace in our lives. You and I always have the power to remove whatever is blocking our good. In Thomas Troward's famous 7 main qualities of the divine, we find that God is life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy. And notice that in this list, power comes before peace. That's because without power, you have no peace. But you do have power. You have the power and authority over what goes on inside you. You have the power to decide what you shall allow to enter that sacred part of you known as the I am. And that means that you have the power to say, peace, be still. And the turbulence that is whirling around you must obey. Ernest Holmes writes that to daily meditate on the perfect life and to daily embody the great ideal is the royal road to freedom, to that peace which passeth understanding. Let us learn to see as God must with a perfect vision. Let us seek the good and the true and believe in them with our whole heart, even though every one we meet may be filled with suffering and limitation appears at all sides. Let us daily say to ourselves, perfect God within me, perfect life within me, which is God, come forth into expression through me as that which I am. Lead me ever into the paths of perfection, and cause me to see only the good. And by this practice, the soul will become illumined and will acquaint itself with God and be at peace. In other words, no matter what's spinning around you, learn to see rightly, and you can say with conviction, "It is well with my soul." In this week's newsletter, I wrote, "Is it possible to experience peace, joy, and love regardless of circumstances?" Well, you may have noticed that there is a reply to email address on that weekly newsletter. And yesterday, one of the people on our mailing list wrote this in response to that question: is it possible to experience peace, joy, and love regardless of circumstances? We know that it is. Otherwise, how did prisoners of war and political prisoners like Nelson Mandela decide to stay alive day after day, month after month, even year after year, in the horrendous conditions of torture, starvation, humiliation, and beatings? And more surprising, how did they come out of those conditions with any kind of positive attitude about life and living? Not all, more. The fact is that the people who went on to live highly successful lives is proof that this stuff works. You can choose what to believe. You can choose to believe in the highest and best, and you can then relax into knowing that it is well, because the highest and best is coming your way. In fact, when you believe in the highest and best, you can be sure that it must be coming your way and that it's doing so right now. When I'm counseling people about their problems, and they do have problems or they wouldn't bother to come in for counseling, I try to carefully listen to their tales of woe. I do not, however, join them in wallowing about in their problems. I do not allow them to say they can't succeed because of something outside of their control. I do not allow them to avoid taking responsibility for their lives. I let them know that regardless of what's going on in their world, they have that within them that is bigger than that which is outside of them. And I frequently point out that many, many people with far bigger problems have gone on to overcome them and live successfully. Yes, the world is full of tragedies, hurts, and disappointments, and there's only so much we can do about a lot of them. We can give in to them, which is not good. We can ignore them, which is not productive. Or we can choose to overcome them, which is the way in which we express life to the fullest. In any given set of circumstances, some will fall into despair, some will muddle along, and some will come through with flying colors. It's not our circumstances, but our reactions to them that count. Many years ago, there was a poet named Ella Wheeler Wilcox. She was hired by the Hearst newspaper chain to write a new poem every day, every year. Most of her poems have gone into obscurity. She's perhaps best known today for the classic line, "Laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone." But she wrote this wonderful poem titled, "'Tis the set of the sail," or "One ship sails east. To every mind there openeth a way, and a way, and a way. A high soul climbs the highway, and the low soul gropes the low. And in between, on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. But to everyone there openeth a highway and a low, and every mind decideth the way his soul shall go." One ship sails east and another west by the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that tells the way we go. Like the winds of the sea are the waves of time as we journey along through life. 'Tis the set of the soul that determines the goal and not the calm or the strife. I opened this talk by quoting the words of the great hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." The author, Horatio Spafford, who lived from 1828 to 1888, was a wealthy Chicago lawyer with a thriving legal practice, vast real estate holdings, a beautiful home, a wife, 4 daughters, and a son. Now, you may be thinking that it's easy to write "It Is Well With My Soul" when you're a successful attorney with a nice home and a nice family. But Horatio Spafford did not write the words "It is well with my soul" because of his great success, but rather after a series of personal and business tragedies. In 1870, at the very height of his professional and financial success, Horatio and his wife Anna suffered the tragic loss of their young son, who died of scarlet fever. And shortly thereafter, the Great Chicago Fire destroyed every real estate investment Spafford had. So in 1873, Spafford scheduled a boat trip to Europe to give his wife and daughters a much-needed vacation and time to recover from the tragedy. He and the family traveled to New York to catch a ship sailing to England. A last-minute business problem arose which needed his attention, and not wanting to ruin the family holiday, he sent his wife and daughters ahead of him while he stayed behind to take care of business. Several days later, he received notice that the ship on which his family was sailing had collided with another vessel. It sunk within 12 minutes, claiming the lives of 226 people. Anna Spafford had stood bravely on the deck with her daughters Annie, Maggie, Bessie, and the baby Tanetta clinging desperately to her. Her last memory before losing consciousness was of her baby being torn violently from her arms by the force of the waters. And in one horrible instant, her children were dead. Anna was only saved from the fate of her daughters by a plank which floated beneath her unconscious body and propped her up. She was eventually rescued and hospitalized in England. And with a heavy heart, Horatio Spafford boarded the next ship out of New York to join his bereaved wife. During that voyage, the captain of the ship called him to the bridge. He said, "A careful reckoning has been made, and I believe that we are now passing the exact place where your family's ship was wrecked. The water here is 3 miles deep." Horatio returned to his cabin and penned those now famous words, "When sorrow like sea billows roll, it is well with my soul." Well, it's easy to be grateful and content when the times are good, but to know that all is well when the times are bad is the result of a spiritual mastery and maturity that we can all achieve. For 150 years, the song of a man who managed to find peace in the midst of the storm has given comfort and hope to countless millions who have lifted their voices to sing, "It is well with my soul." None of us truly know how we would react and respond in such overwhelming circumstances, but the Spaffords knew that God was not the source of trouble, but their ever-present help in times of trouble. And you and I can know that this same help is always available to us. So no matter what circumstances shadow our lives, we can say, just like Horatio Spafford, when peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows, like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. And so it is.